Okay. I'm a little nervous, but this is just going to be unfiltered and raw and no gimmicks, um, no makeup, no wow factor. This is just the plainness of my heart, um, and something that I've been thinking about for a while, a really long time actually. I've been cultivating something. I've been holding something. It's been kind of festering inside of me, and it's not it's not a burden, um, in that sense, but it is kind of heavy, almost like the heaviness of carrying something that's not fully developed yet, like carrying an infant that can't walk yet. But I feel like it's time for it to kind of take shape and stand on its own. Um, I've been thinking a lot about relationships and families and boundaries and, um, what is love, and, all of the pains and suffering that people around me are experiencing, um, but also what the flip side of that looks like. I don't know if you've ever tried to research boundaries on your own, on like the receiving end, but the information is confusing sometimes, sometimes hard to relate to, um, or there's nuances to it that just aren't really clear. And I don't know if you've ever tried to explain boundaries to someone who, has never been introduced to the concept. But again, there's nuance there. There's questions that the other person has that you might not be able to answer, and there's parts of it that just seem like complex concepts. Um, so I've been thinking about this and pondering on it and praying on it, and, I've been looking for a metaphor that can help explain it in a way that makes sense. Um, and so this is my shot at that, and it's definitely not going to be perfect, but I think it could really help. I think it really could help shine, some light on the gray areas that are really confusing. Okay, so here goes nothing. So I want you to imagine that every person gets their own plot of land. Every person. So no person is going to, be left out. And I want you to imagine that it's the parent's job to pass that information down to their kids, and also how to care and cultivate for this land. Um, and then I want you to imagine, once you get this land, what you need to do to care for it and to cultivate it. So you have this plot of land. Everyone has this plot of land. But this one was preserved just for you. Just for you. It was made perfect for you. But, it's kind of a blank slate, so it's up to you to design it how you want, to protect it. Now, most people, to protect their plot of land, they build some kind of fence. So imagine the different kinds of fence. There's some that's, only knee high, maybe even trim high. Maybe it's just like a little boop, boop, boop along the edges. Um, Imagine, some with big, massive fences, some with big towers, and, however that person wants to create it. I want you to imagine, though, um, that you don't have a fence around your plot of land. So you're entrusted with this plot of land and you keep cultivating it, and maybe you started this really beautiful garden over there. Maybe you started creating some kind of shelter, but then people who are walking by, they just walk through. So they're just, trampling what you've already done. They're kind of like moving things around. They're just making it really hard for you to cultivate and care for this land. So you have this plot of land, and you're trying to build it up, and it's becoming really apparent that you're going to need some kind of boundary around it to protect what you're creating. And so you kind of think about, what kind of boundary can I make at this time with whatever resources you have, and what's going to help protect what I'm creating. Maybe at that time you don't have enough materials to go all the way around your land. Maybe you just kind of go around what it is that you're making as like a little bubble there, but you still have people kind of trampling around outside, things like that. So I want you to imagine that you see other people who have been cultivating their land longer. You see a really nice fence, so you wonder, okay, what's inside of there? And you look in there, and there's a beautiful garden. There's a beautiful house. And you're just like, wow, if only I could get in there. And maybe you start to feel like building up my own is kind of a waste of time because it keeps getting trampled. Maybe I'll just start taking from other people. So you see their boundary, and you start finding ways to exploit that boundary and to take from what they've already created. And maybe you start out small just to test the waters. So you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to take a couple things here and there and see how they respond. And if they're, oh, it's not too bad, then you think, okay, well, I can get away with taking more and more. And eventually, you're destroying this other person's creation that they've created to build up your own. But you bring all of the things from theirs over to yours, and you still don't have good boundaries. So what you've stolen from them to create yours, it looks good for maybe a minute or two, and then it gets ransacked and destroyed. So I think it's kind of safe to assume that the more you build up what's inside the boundary, and the more beautiful it is, and the more work you've put into it, and the more it's been cultivated, you need a boundary that is actively going to reflect that and protect that better, right? So you wouldn't take a really beautifully cultivated garden and just put like a tiny little trim fence around there that people could easily just step over. You would put a little bit more work into your boundaries to really understand, this is what I have inside that I need to protect. It's important. So now I want you to imagine that it was your parents' responsibility to tell you that you were going to get, this property to care for, and how to care for it, and tips and tricks that they've learned along the way, and whatever they need to know to be successful. What to expect within reason, what's abnormal, what's kind of normal in the process, things like that. Now I want you to imagine that you don't have parents, or your parents were too busy doing their own thing, whatever that might have been, and they couldn't share with you that information. I want you to imagine being a little kid walking around and seeing all of these properties with their nice fences and everything nice inside, and not knowing that you're going to get your own too. It's divinely given to you. This is your right and your abundance. But you don't know this because no one told you this. So when you are walking around and you see these boundaries, they might hurt you a little. Just the vision of them. It might feel like, well, how come, they have boundaries keeping me out? How come I'm not welcome here? How come they get that and I don't? Kind of thing. And it might make you, as a little kid, start to turn to other ways to get that. So you think that you have to take it from someone else somehow. Or, whether it's sneakily, like going across the barriers, or charming the person in the house so that they let you in, and then destroying it, or whatever it is that you plan to do. So I also want you to think about someone who might not know that they're allowed to build a fence, or that they should build a fence, or so in this situation, this would be kind of like people who have been highly traumatized, and sexual assault victims, people whose boundaries really get messed with. So these are people who they don't have a fence, or their fence was broken. Someone came and just bulldozed part of their fence. Maybe it was a really good fence, but someone came and just destroyed the fence. And then that left a huge vulnerability for other people to come and mess with whatever that person has cultivated inside the confines of their property that was taken from them in a really in a really tragic way, an act of blindsided betrayal. So it's important for that person to rebuild their fence, even though it's hard and they shouldn't have to, and that's effort they shouldn't have to re-put in, but it's important for them to take the time to do that, because if they have everyone now trampling around in their abundant place, that's not good. They'll have to keep rebuilding over and over and over again. And some people find themselves in this place where they never rebuild, and everything just gets ransacked and stripped away from them. And that is why the fence is really important. The boundary is important. As you're building the inside, you also need to protect it. Now, those people who they don't know they're going to get their own property or their own land to care for. Or maybe they know they're going to get the property, but they look at it as a blank slate and they have no idea how to cultivate that, or their effort just is like, dude, I'm not doing that, when there's a perfectly beautiful one over there that I can just take from. Those people who are usually wounded in some way are what we would commonly refer to as like having those narcissistic traits, because you have to have a little bit of entitlement in you to want to take it from someone else when you know you already have it, when it's yours already. You have your own. So why is that one? Why do you need that one? Now, there's also people who don't know what to do to cultivate their land, what's inside of it, but they spend their entire life focusing only on the boundary and building up that boundary to be like a fortress. So you've got this huge, stone fortress with electric fencing and and all of this, and it's protecting something that's really raw and unformed inside. And a lot of times that comes from fear, right? So that we don't want anyone to come in. Like there's no access point there. So when we talk about healthy boundaries, what we're talking about is a reliable boundary that protects what's inside and matches the level of protection it needs, but also a way for people who live inside of the structure and people who are visiting or people who want to come in at that person's, permission. Now, if you can't escape your own creation, you're in an inner prison. And if you bring your loved ones in there and they can't escape either, you're suffocating them also in your prison. If no one can come visit you, you're in a different kind of prison of, loneliness, because humans need connection. So what you're looking for is you're looking for a boundary that lets people in, but lets them in within the proper rules of engagement. If you can't respect this space, if it's not sacred to you in the way that it's sacred to me, then you don't belong there. And that's just a fact. You don't belong there. And so when we talk about love, what we're talking about is giving somebody access to our sacred space. This is what we've cultivated so far. And you want that person to have a reverence for what you're creating. You want them to love it in the way that you love it. You want them to respect it in the way that you respect it. This sacred space that you're protecting, this is a metaphor for your heart. And however you've built it up so far, you want to make sure that the person who you allow free access to into this space, that they respect that place, that they see it as sacred too, that they have a reverence for it. There's no place for arrogance and entitlement in someone else's sacred space. And when you get into a relationship with someone, you're swapping keys, you're giving them free access there. And if they come into your place and stomp around and rip things out and say, why did you do it like that? That's stupid. You should have done it like this. And they start destroying what's inside because they don't have a reverence for the amount of work and time and effort, and they don't have the vision for it like you do, then they shouldn't be there. Now, there's people who you give them a key to your sacred space, and you reserve a spot for them. Like you create a spot for them, a home for them within your home, and it's designed just for them. There's no one else who can go there. And there's people who they don't want to use the key, and they don't want to respect that, and they want to exploit the boundaries. They want to find the weak points. They want to pull on them. They want to tear down boards in your fence. They want to slowly kind of shift things around. They want to hide your shovels from you. They want to rip out your plants and things like that. and you can't make that person act in a way that you want them to. That's not what a boundary is. A boundary is not you do what I say. A boundary is that You know, if they can't respect this sacred space, they're just not allowed there. They can't come in. You have to change the locks. And that's it, because you are the protector of this heart. That is your sole responsibility. It was given to you. It's your divine birthright. And sometimes, you know, sometimes we have people who are very charming and they knock on all the doors. They don't exploit fences. They come straight to the front door and they befriend you and all that jazz. And then they sort of beguile you into giving you a key. And then you're like, oh, this is nice. And then, you know, they wreak havoc there. I would say that that would be similar to like serial cheaters and people who charm their way through the front door, knowing that they are not going to treasure what's inside. They're not going to respect it the way you do. And some people genuinely think that they will respect what you've cultivated more than you do. And if someone feels that way, that's a level of arrogance. That's a level of entitlement, because you built this with your own hands from day one. They cannot appreciate it the way that you can. And the only person who is truly worthy is someone who knows that they're not and respects that, but still cherishes what's inside and values what's inside. So a loving relationship looks like swapping keys and having a reverence for what the other person built inside and respecting it. And if that person invites you, then you get to work on each other's spaces together. You get to build something really beautiful. You can merge it, make it in something that maybe your imagination could have never thought of. But you can only do that with someone trustworthy. That's the only way. Now, there are a lot of ways that people exploit boundaries. There's the Hansel and Gretel. Maybe you have a really nice house. Maybe you're one of those little kids who didn't know they're going to get their own house. So you see this really nice house and you've never been invited inside before. And someone sees you admiring it and they're like, hey, little kid, come in here. And then they use you to build up their nice house. So that's kind of like a reverse exploitation. They play off of that lack mindset that kid has. You know, there's so many different ways it can go down. But the idea is not that boundaries cause harm to other people, because they don't. The only people who get harmed by other people's boundaries are people who wanted to exploit that person and run up against a wall. And then they get mad. Or people who don't know that they have their own that's just gifted to them. And they think everyone else has that but them. That can cause them like an emotional pain. Or the people who are trapped inside of the boundaries because the boundaries were just way too enforced. They turned into a prison. But healthy boundaries don't cause harm to anyone. They protect what's inside. They set reasonable expectations. And they foster a reverence for what's sacred. And that's important. So if that's what a boundary is, then, what is love? And I kind of said this before, but love is trading the key with someone, giving them access to the space. But love is also cherishing that person's space, recognizing its beauty, and not just admiring it. This is not trophy husband, wife. This is, trophy partner. It's not just about admiration or appreciation. It's a genuine care for what's been cultivated here. It's an understanding of that.